reached into the bathroom trash without thinking, tied the garbage bag shut, and something white CA pregnancy test. 2 unmistakable pink lines. For a second, I just stared at it. Then I laughed, not because I was happy. Because 6 months earlier, I'd walked out of a urologist's office after getting a vasectomy. Venus agreed 1 child was enough, and I wanted to surprise. I picked up the test with a paper towel, turning it over in my hands. No, I whispered. The dates ran through my head. The procedure, the follow-up appointment, the confirmation that it had worked. There was no mistake if my wife was pregnant. It wasn't mine. My first instinct was to storm upstairs and demand answers. Instead, I forced myself to breathe. I wrapped the test exactly the way I'd found it, placed it back into the trash beneath a few paper outside as if nothing had happened. If Vanessa wanted me to discover it, she'd tell me. If she didn't, then she'd expose herself. I had no idea that by this time tomorrow, I'd learn the pregnancy wasn't even the biggest lie in my. Vanessa acted completely normal that evening. She kissed me on the cheek when I got home. Long day, she asked while stirring pasta on the stove. Usual, she smiled, thinking we should plan a family vacation this fall. I looked toward our 7-year-old son coloring at the kitchen table. He looked up and grinned. Dad, can we go somewhere with a beach? I forced a smile back. We'll see, buddy. The rest of dinner, I watched Vanessa laugh, joke, and reach for my hand across the table as if mourning. Not once did she mention a pregnancy. Not once did she seem nervous. That calm confidence unsettled me more than panic ever could. The next morning, I grabbed my briefcase and stopped when I heard Vanessa's voice drifting from the she'd left her phone on speaker. Of course I'll tell him it's his, she said with a laugh. Her mother laughed too. I did this with the first child. He didn't notice. Brandon isn't ready for kids, so Ethan will rise. The room spun. My fingers loosened around my car keys until they hit the hardwood floor. Vanessa never heard them. Her mother chuckled again. I told you years ago he'd never question you. That man trusts you more than he trusts himself. I didn't walk into that room. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Instead, I quietly picked up my keys, waited until Vanessa left for work an hour later, and began pay irreplaceable possession I owned. Before closing the front door for what I suspected would be the last time, I stopped in front of our wedding, our vacations, our son's first birthday. I took pictures of every frame with my phone. If my entire marriage had been built on lies, I wanted a record of exactly what those lies had looked that evening. After finding Brandon's home address through public records, I anonymously mailed the just before midnight. My phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. A calm woman's voice spoke first. Are you Ethan? Yes, my name is Melissa. She paused long enough for my heartbeat to become the only sound I could hear. I got your package. Another silence, then she said something that made the pregnancy seem almost insignificant. You think this baby is the worst thing my husband has done. But that's not why I'm calling. Melissa didn't sound angry. She sounded exhausted. Been waiting for someone to prove I wasn't crazy, she said quietly. Thank you. I sat inside my parked car outside a 24-hour grocery store, gripping the steering wheel. You knew he was cheating. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know who she was. I closed my eyes. It's my wife. I figured that out when I saw the return address. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, Melissa broke the silence. My husband is Brandon Lewis. Name hit me immediately, Brandon. The same Brandon Vanessa claimed was nothing more than a former coworker she'd occasionally met, for I remembered asking about him once. She'd laughed. Jealous over a guy who's practically family. I believed her. Now every one of those conversations echoed differently. Melissa sighed. Need you to know something. I'm listening. Keeps telling people he doesn't want children. I frowned. What? He tells everyone he isn't ready to be a father. I looked out through the windshield at the empty parking lot. Vanessa told me he never wanted responsibility. Melissa gave a bitter laugh. No, Brandon doesn't want responsibility for children he already has. That sentence settled like concrete inside my chest. She continued. Been collecting evidence for almost 8 months. You have proof. I have enough proof to destroy my marriage. She paused. I just didn't know your wife was involved. The next afternoon, we agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop halfway across town. Neither of us wanted attention. When I arrived, Melissa already sat in the corner with a thick accordion folder resting beside her. She looked older than her 33 years, not physically, emotionally. You must be Ethan. I nodded and sat down. For several awkward seconds, neither of us reached for the folder. Instead, she slid her phone across the table. Look, It was Brandon's social media timeline, vacation photos, conference selfies, business dinners. At first they seemed ordinary, then Melissa tapped several dates. Cross-reference these. I opened my own calendar. Every highlighted weekend matched one of Vanessa's supposed marketing conferences. Chicago, Denver, Scottsdale, Seattle, each trip she'd insisted was mandatory. Each one Brandon had supposedly attended for work as well. My stomach tightened. I drove her to the airport for Chicago. Melissa nodded sadly. I know. You know, she pulled out printed airline records she'd legally obtained through their shared travel account. They weren't even on separate flights. I stared at the matching itineraries. Same departure, same return, adjacent seats. For years, my hands began trembling. I remembered helping Vanessa pack those suitcases, kissing her goodbye, watching her disappear through airport security while telling our son Mommy was working hard for them. Melissa gently pushed a tissue box toward me. Cried enough over this. I laughed bitterly. I don't think I've started yet. She reached into the folder again. There is something else. She placed several printed photographs on the table. Hotel security stills, restaurant receipts, luxury purchases, none of them alone proved an affair. Together they painted a life I'd never been invited to see. They weren't careful with money, Melissa said. They were careful with emotions. I slowly stacked the papers back together. I wanted to confront Vanessa yesterday. I'm glad you didn't. So am I. For the first time since finding the pregnancy test, I realized anger wasn't enough. If I confronted her now, she'd lie. She'd delete evidence. She'd rewrite history. I needed facts that couldn't be argued away. Melissa seemed to read my mind. We gather everything first. I nodded. No accusations. No scenes. No warnings. She smiled faintly. Exactly. We spent the next 2 hours comparing timelines, credit card statements, conference schedules, old text screenshots. Every new document erased another excuse I'd once believed. Nothing about the affair had been spontaneous. It had been organized, planned, protected. As we stood to leave, Melissa reached into the folder one last time. She removed a sealed envelope nearly an inch thick and placed it into my hands. I almost forgot. What's this? She looked directly into my eyes. You haven't even seen the financial side yet. I opened the envelope. The very first page made my knees go weak. The first document was a credit card statement. Not mine, Brandon's. I scanned the highlighted transactions, luxury hotels, private rental apartments, jewelry boutiques, weekend resort deposits. Every payment had a handwritten note from Melissa beside it. Chicago, Denver, Scottsdale, Seattle. The same cities Vanessa had claimed were mandatory marketing conferences. I looked up slowly. These weren't business expenses. Melissa shook her head. They were. I frowned. Just weren't legitimate. She pulled out another stack of documents. Brandon owns a consulting company. So, he submitted these trips as client meetings. I stared at the expense reports. Hotel invoices had been labeled executive retreats. Jewelry purchases had been categorized as client appreciation gifts. Vacation rentals appeared as temporary office accommodations. He billed his own company for weekends with your wife. I leaned back in disbelief. So he wasn't just cheating, was stealing from his business while doing it. Melissa nodded. Already copied everything. The first time since we'd met, I realized this wasn't simply about two people having an affair. They had built an entire secret life financed through deception. I carefully photographed every page before returning the originals. I need an attorney. You needed one yesterday. By the following morning, I was sitting inside a downtown law office explaining everything from the Vanessa's mother. The attorney listened without interrupting. When I finished, he folded his hands. Confront your wife. I wasn't planning to. He slid a legal pad toward me. File first. About the pregnancy, that's her problem. What about my son? We'll address that legally. His calmness steadied me. Within 48 hours, divorce papers were prepared. Asset protection requests were filed. Financial accounts were documented. Every important record was copied. I wasn't running anymore. I was protecting myself. Vanessa found out before sunset. Her phone call came while I was leaving the attorney's office. Ethan. I ignored it. Another call, then another. By the time I reached my car, there were 12 missed calls, then a text. What is this? Someone served me divorce papers at work. I didn't answer. Apparently, several coworkers had witnessed the process server handing Vanessa the envelope in the me. An hour later, another message arrived. Please talk to me. This has to be a misunderstanding. Still nothing from me. That evening, my apartment buzzer rang repeatedly. When I checked the security camera, Vanessa stood outside carrying an overnight bag. Ethan, she pressed the intercom again. No, you're in there. She wasn't. I'd moved into a different temporary apartment 2 days earlier. She was standing outside in a dress I'd intentionally left behind. Meanwhile, across town, Melissa was confronting Brandon. She met him in the executive conference room of his office. She calmly placed copies of the expense reports in front of him. "What is this?" Brandon asked. "You tell me." He flipped through the pages. His confidence disappeared. Minutes later, 2 senior executives entered the room after Melissa informed the company's internal ursements. Employees watched Brandon being escorted into another conference room. Rumors spread through the office before lunchtime. Neither affair partner could control the story anymore. Vanessa's mother tried a different strategy. She called Ethan's parents, then his sister, then cousins. She painted Vanessa as a pregnant wife abandoned without warning by a cold-hearted husband. Several relatives called demanding explanations. I gave them none. Instead, I instructed my attorney to file one additional request. Court-ordered DNA testing for both the unborn child, once legally appropriate, and the child I'd spent 7 years believing when Vanessa received notice of the request. Everything changed. She stopped asking for reconciliation. She stopped demanding answers. Instead, she panicked. "You can't do this," she shouted during her first direct conversation with my attorney. Trying to traumatize our son, she filed emergency paperwork asking the court to block all testing. The attorney smiled when he read her filing. Interesting. What? People rarely fight this hard to prevent evidence that would prove they're telling the truth. The first time since finding the pregnancy test, I felt certainty replacing doubt. Then my attorney looked up from the court filing. "She's asking the judge to stop the DNA testing altogether." Hearing lasted less than 15 minutes. Vanessa's attorney argued that DNA testing would only create unnecessary emotional harm. My attorney stood calmly when it was his turn. "Honor, my client recently discovered information giving him reasonable grounds to question patrevent testing only reinforces why the truth must." The judge glanced through the filings, then toward Vanessa. "Mrs. Carter, is there a legal reason the court should prevent scientifically reliable evidence from?" Vanessa looked at her attorney before quietly answering. "No." The judge signed the order. "Testing is approved." Sound of the pen touching paper felt louder than anything said in the courtroom. Outside, Vanessa hurried after me. "Ethan, please." I didn't stop walking. "You don't understand." I turned around once. "Then explain." She opened her mouth and said nothing. For the first time in our marriage, she had no believable lie ready. I walked away. Within days, the consequences began spreading faster than either of us expected. Brandon stopped answering Vanessa's calls. At first, they rang unanswered. Then they went straight to voicemail. Eventually, his number became disconnected. "He blocked her," Melissa told me over coffee. "He blocked everyone." Apparently, Brandon had realized the affair wasn't simply threatening his marriage anymore. His company's internal audit had expanded after reviewing the questionable expense reports. The investigation now reached beyond the affair itself. He was trying to save himself. Vanessa suddenly found herself completely alone. No husband, no lover. No explanation that anyone believed. Melissa wasn't finished. I found something else. She handed me a flash drive, cloud backups. That evening, we reviewed the recovered files with my attorney, deleted text messages, archived emails, old photographs. Voice recordings automatically saved during phone backups. None of them had been intended for anyone else's eyes. One recording immediately caught our attention. Vanessa's mother's voice filled the conference room. "Ethan won't question anything. He loves that little boy too much." Vanessa laughed. "I know. If Brandon changes his mind later, we'll deal with it then." "Won't. So Ethan raises him." Another recording followed from nearly 3 years earlier, Brandon's voice. "I can't have kids showing up at my house." Vanessa answered without hesitation. "They won't. Ethan thinks he's the father." Silence settled over the room. Even my attorney slowly removed his glasses. "No jury likes conspiracy," he said quietly. "This wasn't one bad decision. It was a long-term deception." Recordings continued. Discussions about fake work conferences, coordinating hotel reservations, timing phone calls, making sure Ethan never met Brandon unexpectedly. Every lie had been planned weeks in advance. Nothing about my marriage had been accidental. Meanwhile, word of the court proceedings reached our families. Relatives who had criticized me for abandoning a pregnant wife suddenly became far less confident. My sister called. "Ethan." "What?" I didn't know. I believed Vanessa. "I know. One by one, similar calls followed. No one apologized completely, not yet, but the certainty they'd once had was disappearing. Pressure shifted onto Vanessa instead. Neighbors stopped dropping by, friends became distant. Even people who defended her began asking uncomfortable questions after learning the court had ordered. Finally, the appointment arrived. The laboratory was quiet, clinical, almost emotionless. Vanessa sat across the waiting room, refusing to look at me. Neither of us spoke. Samples were collected, paperwork signed. Then we waited, the longest 10 days of my life. When the results finally arrived, both attorneys requested everyone meet together. A sealed envelope rested on the conference table. No one reached for it immediately. Vanessa stared at it without blinking. Her hands shook so badly she clasped them together beneath the table. My attorney slowly picked up the envelope. He broke the seal, pulled out the report, adjusted his glasses, just as he opened his mouth to read the first line. A sharp knock interrupted the room. Everyone looked toward the door. A courier stepped inside carrying another sealed evidence package addressed to Melissa. "Additional records requested by counsel," he announced. Every eye shifted from the DNA report to the new package. The courier placed the sealed package on the conference table. Melissa immediately recognized the sender. "My attorney requested these from the forensic accountant," she said. My attorney looked at the label. "Let's finish the DNA results first." He unfolded the laboratory report and took a slow breath. "The results exclude Ethan Carter as the biological father." Room fell silent. He continued. "Probability of paternity is 0%. Vanessa covered her mouth. She didn't cry, she didn't argue, she simply stared at the table. Then my attorney turned to the second page. "There is also testing regarding the older child." Every muscle in my body tightened. I already suspected the answer. Knowing it was coming didn't make it easier. "Results also exclude Ethan Carter as the biological father of the minor child." Words echoed through the room. 7 years, birthday parties, school projects, soccer games, bedtime stories. Every scraped knee I'd bandaged, every nightmare I'd comforted, every promise I'd made, none of it had been based on the truth. Vanessa finally whispered, "Ethan." I slowly looked at her. When she closed her eyes, whole time, knew a tear rolled down her cheek. "Yes," I nodded once. "So when you told your mother you did it the first time." It was true. No excuses, no elaborate story, just one devastating admission. Melissa quietly pushed the unopened evidence package toward my attorney. "I think we should see the rest." He opened it carefully. Inside were certified financial records, recovered cloud backups, authenticated text messages. Hotelvery payment Brandon had disguised through his con. The documentation established years of overlapping travel, coordinated hotel bookings, expensive gift. Then came the printed message history. Vanessa's mother had written, "Ethan is dependable. Brandon isn't. Don't ruin your stability by telling the truth." Vanessa replied, "I won't. Ethan already thinks our son is his." Another message appeared months later after Brandon briefly suggested acknowledging the child. Vanessa answered immediately, "Too late." Ethan signed the birth paperwork. "Leave it alone." Melissa quietly closed her eyes. "I always wondered why Brandon refused to talk about children." Another recovered message answered that too. Brandon had written, "I can't have kids showing up at my house. My marriage would be over." Vanessa responded, "Relax. Ethan will keep believing they're his." There were no more questions, only confirmation. Melissa stood first. "Seen everything I need." She turned toward me. "I'm sorry." "So am I." She picked up copies of the financial evidence. "My divorce attorney is filing this afternoon." She walked out without looking back. Brandon never appeared. According to his attorney, he declined to attend after being advised the evidence was overwhelming. Within weeks, Melissa finalized divorce proceedings. Brandon's employer completed its investigation into the fraudulent business reimbursements. Lost his executive position after the audit confirmed years of improper expense claims, unrelated evidence trail. His professional reputation collapsed almost overnight. Vanessa's situation unraveled just as quickly. The relatives who had called me heartless after the divorce filing began contacting me again. This time their voices sounded completely different. My sister arrived first. "Owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything." "I do." She looked down. "I judged you before knowing the truth." Over the next month, similar conversations followed. Friends admitted they'd believed Vanessa's version because it sounded simpler. Neighbors quietly stopped treating me like the man who abandoned his pregnant wife. The story everyone thought they knew disappeared once the facts emerged. The divorce itself became surprisingly straightforward. The court reviewed years of documented deception, financial misconduct, and the evidence presented what could be resolved through the legal process was resolved. What couldn't be undone remained part of the past. The hardest moment wasn't leaving the courtroom. It happened weeks later inside a storage box. I found our old family photo albums. For several minutes, I simply turned the pages: wedding pictures, Christmas mornings, beach vacations, first day of school photographs. I didn't throw them away. Those moments had been real to me, even if the foundation beneath them wasn't. I closed the final album, placed it back into the box, and carried it into storage. Not because I wanted to forget, because I was finally ready to stop living inside memories built on deception. I started therapy. I reconnected with old friends I'd slowly drifted away from during my marriage. I bought a modest home closer to my parents. For the first time in years, my life became quiet, not empty, peaceful. Months later, Melissa called one final time. "I just wanted to thank you." "What?" "If you hadn't mailed that pregnancy test." She laughed softly. "I'd probably still be living the same lie." So would I. After we hung up, I sat on my back porch watching the sun disappear behind the trees. Finding that pregnancy test had felt like the worst moment of my life. Instead, it became the moment everything false finally collapsed. Vanessa lost the comfortable life she'd built on deception. Brandon lost the career and marriage he'd tried to protect with lies. I didn't get revenge by shouting, humiliating them, or destroying them. The truth did all of that on its own. My revenge was refusing to spend another day living inside a story they had written for me. The day I found that pregnancy test, I believed my family was falling apart. Looking back, I finally understood something far more important. The family I thought I had never truly existed. Walking away wasn't the end of my life. It was the beginning of an honest one.